To start off with what's happening between Iran and the U.S., we've been joined by Dr. Muqtedar Khan, who's a senior fellow at the New Alliance Institute of Delaware. Thank you very much, Dr. Muqtedar, for joining us and being a part of the show. In your take, what do you think is the current conditions in which the U.S. and Iran are operating in? It seems that while there has been rhetoric referring to a peace deal or talks or possibilities of talks, there's been a suspension, at least for now, as far as we know, even though that may not be what the U.S. president says he's heard from the Iranian side, but he did welcome the silence. And there's also, of course, the attacks that we've seen happen over the weekend and then earlier today. And so in what ways do you think this represents the current situation in which both the parties are in and the likely steps forward that they're going to undertake?
Thank you for having me, Sana. I think one of the challenges that we face is that Donald Trump is so frequently rushing to make announcements. I think he's forgetting that he's the president of the United States and not in the business of breaking news. So he rushes and prematurely makes announcements that the deal is made and we have finished negotiations. We're just ironing out the details. And you don't see the same thing from the Iranians. For example, the Iranians are waiting for everything to happen before they make the announcement. So a lot of us and our expectations have been raised because Donald Trump has frequently said that I have a deal on the table, this is the greatest of deals, etc. And part of it is there is a conspiracy theory here in the US that the Trump administration, his family, and people near around him are using this war to play the stock market. So there are lots of big bets taken, sometimes to the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars, like 20 minutes before he says something on Truth Social. So basically what has happened is that they are stuck on 2 or 3 issues. One of the issues is that Israel will not allow the United States to lump the peace deal around the Strait of Hormuz and Iran with Lebanon. So so while Israel is willing to respect the ceasefire with Iran proper, it has absolutely not respected the ceasefire discussions to include Lebanon, and is therefore having a separate ceasefire discussions with the government of Lebanon, not with Hezbollah. And even there, more than 700 people have been killed since the ceasefire started with Lebanon. For the Iranians, they want 3-4 things, and Donald Trump is not giving them. They want the opening of the Strait of Hormuz or the blockade, but they want sanctions reliefs right away, and they're not willing to discuss anything when it comes to the nuclear issue. So there's nothing really decided. So the memorandum of understanding, whatever the drafts that the Pakistanis are sharing with Donald Trump and returning, basically says that both sides will open the Strait of Hormuz. There will be sanctions relief to Iran, and also the $12 billion that are now in Qatari control will be released to Iran, which Qatar has now declined. And so those steps have to happen, and then the Strait of Hormuz will be opened by the Iranians as well as by the United States. And of course, Iran is also looking for guarantees that there will be no invasion further afterwards, after they have surrendered the nuclear weapon. The enriched uranium that they have, about 1,000 pounds or over 400 kilos. So the only concession that the Iranians have made is that they're willing to consider the possibility of surrendering the 60% enriched uranium that they have to a third party, or to keep it in Iran under IAEA control or inspections. But Donald Trump keeps saying all the time that, oh, Iran will never have a nuclear weapon. I mean, that's not the kind of language you would see in any agreement. Iran will never have. What does it mean? 5,000 years from now, Iran will not have a nuclear weapon. So he is constantly playing. Donald Trump is essentially stuck with this problem that he realizes that he cannot go forward militarily. The utility of military strikes has diminished significantly. Plus, he has realized that in order to get a deal, he has to make financial concessions, which means releasing the frozen assets of Iran, plus letting Iran trade freely. And he has been so critical of Obama's JCPOA for enriching Iran with billions of dollars, which was just Iran's money, really, that he feels that he's going to be exposed to the same criticism that not only have you given a bad deal, you've got a deal which is worse than JCPOA, you are also giving money to Iran, but you're also letting Iran control the Strait of Hormuz. So he wants simple language. No nuclear weapons ever. Strait of Hormuz totally open with no tolls. That's all he wants to see on a paper. The Iranians are not dealing with simplicity, they are dealing with complexities, and now they have added an additional condition saying that Israel's incursions and its violence and its killing of civilians in Lebanon is essentially a violation of the existing ceasefire. So they are saying violation of the ceasefire on any front is a violation of ceasefire on all fronts. So this language coming from the Iranians, and there is also an internal coup going on inside Iran, which is that with each iteration of negotiations, you see that IRGC is gaining more and more control over the government and decision-making inside Iran. And the current set of leaders at IRGC are definitely more hardcore and more hardliners than the previous set. And they are not really willing to make any concessions on key issues, which is Iran's right to enrich uranium. And they want to have some kind of a toll on Hormuz. They are saying that either you give us that, or let us charge an environmental protection fees if you don't want to call it a toll, which the Chinese have agreed to. The Chinese said no tolls, but they are okay with an environmental protection fund, which Oman and Iran will share. But the Iranians also want reparations for the damage that has been done. There are lots of rumors here in Washington that Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner have proposed an alternative way of dealing with what has happened to Iran, which is they are floating a $300 billion fund, an investment fund, which will invest in Iran and rebuild Iran. And so basically Witkoff and Kushner will probably make billions of dollars just in commissions. But where is that money going to come in? It will be American taxpayer money, probably arm twisting of the Qataris and the Saudis, maybe even UAE, to pour in billions of dollars to rebuild Iran with Steve Kushner and Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff playing an important role. So there's an element of corruption also going on. So we are dealing with a very complex situation, which is confounding us because of the contradictory statements that Donald Trump is making. I wish, one of the things that Pakistan has achieved, which I find quite remarkable, is there is no leak from inside Pakistan on the negotiations. Nobody in Pakistan is telling us what is in the agreement so far in terms of as they carry the messages back and forth, which now the Iranians have actually stopped. So we are stuck there to see. Donald Trump does not have a military option. There are some people who thought that he was waiting for the Hajj to get over because the Saudis didn't want Iranians shooting missiles at the Hajjis. Now that the Hajj season is over, I mean, the Hajj is still in Saudi Arabia. They will be there for a month. But the U.S. is more open to resuming attacks on Iran. And the request that the Saudis had made may not be, as compelling anymore.
Right. Dr. Muqtedar, let me come back with you in terms of when we see the situation right now, and especially with what is going on in Lebanon. We have countries like Saudi Arabia condemning the Israeli actions, but we've seen what's been going on in Gaza quite some time now, and the situation in Lebanon has also been going on for a while. Of course, Beirut is now in the picture, but there's been this aggression that has been happening for quite some time. How are the regional countries, and particularly Saudi Arabia, going to be involved in this? They've had their condemnation, of course, but what will be the extent of their involvement in the developing situation?
I'm not very sure to what extent the Saudis are going to pressure Washington or Israel, because they don't negotiate directly with Israel anymore. There are some behind the scenes exchanges. But I'm not very sure that they are going to have any conditions on Israel, and Israel is not going to respect them. The only thing that Israel might respect is if the United States is willing to hold back weapons or put pressure. And if you recall, about 2 or 3 weeks ago, there was this big announcement that the biggest transport of weapons had taken place from the US to Israel, and all within 24 hours. Some 6,000 tons of weapons had been transferred to Israel. So Israel is not under pressure. We also know that it is America's defensive missile stockpiles which have been used to protect Israel, which are depleted, while Israel's own defense stockpiles haven't been depleted to that extent. So Israel is sitting a bit comfortably, even though it is taking some hits. About 27 Israeli soldiers have died in the Lebanon war, whereas they lost nobody in the war with Iran. So yes, they are under pressure. Hezbollah is shooting rockets, but I think Israel is using the Lebanon war to essentially make sure that U.S.-Iran deal doesn't come through. They know that that is the sore point. Donald Trump cannot or is not willing to tell Netanyahu to stop the fighting in Lebanon and respect the ceasefire that it has already agreed to. And so Israel knows that if they want to upset Iran, they keep attacking Hezbollah and Lebanon. And finally, the Iranians did. They stopped communicating, in fact, a few hours ago because of Israeli incursions into Lebanon. The Gulf countries are requesting, they are not still being able to put any pressure either on Iran or on the United States. They are a bit confused, really. So at some point, you get the signals that they don't trust the U.S. anymore. They are extremely upset that U.S. started this war and has not done a good job of defending them. And they know that they have to live with Iran going forward, a more aggressive, perhaps a more powerful Iran if it gets all the financial opportunities it is seeking, such as lifting of sanctions and more return of its assets. So they are caught in a rock and a hard place. And then on top of that, Donald Trump has thrown another wrench into the machinery by insisting that Saudi Arabia, Pakistan, Indonesia, and Qatar join the Abraham Accords. These countries have all responded negatively, but they are constantly feeling this additional pressure from Donald Trump to recognize Israel. So I think that right now the worst position is that of the Gulf countries. They are stuck between a rock and a hard place. They do not know what to do. And the latest threats that are coming out of Iranian proxies is that if the United States resorts to military action against Iran, if Trump is losing his patience, then it is quite possible that Iran will activate its proxies, especially the Houthis, and shut down Bab al-Mandab also, which means they will stop the oil that is going through the Red Sea. And that will again put pressure. If you notice that the price of oil has again shot up by 3% today, and if there is more exchanges between the Iranians and the US, then people might conclude that the ceasefire itself has been abandoned. So the optimism that we had 2 days ago, that doesn't exist right now, and it looks as if that the United States is now stuck in a quagmire again. Donald Trump had promised American voters that there would be no never-ending wars, but it seems that we are in a never-ending war and a never-ending negotiations. So going forward, I think that unless President Trump is willing to abandon this goal of trying to look very good and do what is right for the region, for the US, and for the Iranians, then he will have to make compromises. And he cannot move on to the discussions. The Iranians have been so adamant from the very beginning that they will not discuss the nuclear deal until the Strait of Hormuz is open and they have received some concessions, because they don't trust the United States. They say that in the last two negotiations that we were having, as soon as we reached a point where we thought we were reaching something positive, the US attacked them. last year and recently too. So they are very, very skeptical about Donald Trump's credibility and intentions. So they want to play it very safe, and so they want everything to be in slow motion. They want to see concessions and confidence building measures from the US, such as releasing the frozen funds, which are the US has frozen Iranian funds in many, many countries, including India, for example, and European Union. But they want this first tranche that is there in Qatari banks to be released, some sanctions relief, and then steady opening of the Strait of Hormuz. So they want to do this step by step, so that it becomes very difficult for Donald Trump to retract immediately from all the steps that he would have taken before they start negotiating about the nuclear weapon. Iran has two levers. One is the enriched uranium, which is giving Israel sleepless nights, and their control on the Strait of Hormuz. And Donald Trump is saying, give me that today, and then Iran will have nothing left. So Iran is not going to give either of those things right away.
Right. Thank you very much, Dr. Muqtedar, for joining us and being a part of the discussion, sharing that comprehensive insight into what's going on